We are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. We are back from the All-Star break. It is Wednesday, March 10th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer, ShipMyMoney himself, and we are brought to you by No House Advantage, and we'll touch on No House Advantage in a little bit. But first, Adam, how are you?
Good. First strategy show of the season for me, excluding Saturday mornings.
There you go. It's nice to have you back. I'm excited. We're diving into a great slate of two games with a large amount of ambiguity. These are some of it, like the Spurs for sure, the Grizzlies for sure. Two of the teams that I don't want to see on a two-game slate because there's too many options. This is not fun.
Lesser extent on the Grizzlies, but Spurs for sure.
I don't know. You get into that Desmond Bane, Justice Winslow, Kyle Anderson. How many minutes does DeAnthony Melton play? Like, if Grayson Allen were healthy today, I think the Memphis Grizzlies would be a real problem on a two-game slate.
Well, yeah, but Grayson Allen's not healthy.
Sure. So now they're just like slightly less of a problem.
But also the guys that you're talking about like aren't that good. Like Justice Winslow produces at a decent rate, but like if you're off by a couple minutes on Desmond Bane, it probably means you missed by like less than a fantasy point. If you know, it's the Spurs, like the entire team, except for DeRozan and Murray. Like, I don't know how many minutes they're going to play.
I kind of, even just being off by a little bit on a two-gamer like this, just because they look so good facing Washington that I'm already dreading whoever it ends up. Like the Joe Val rolls an ankle, it's a Tillman day, and that's the way that you get into the top of every contest. And I don't ever get him because I don't think that it's just, I see it coming already.
Yeah, I mean, that's two-game slates in general.
But I'm excited for it because basketball is back, and I haven't played fantasy in a while other than MMA on Saturday, and I'm starting to get the shakes.
Yeah, I'm excited to have, played hockey yesterday, did not win the 50K or 100K to first like I did last year. So really disappointing result there, not to take down that tournament again. So glad to get back to basketball.
Is that what it was, the final day before the break?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, like the biggest hockey tournament of the entire year.
Okay. Well, guys, as you get in the door, be sure to hit that like button. Jordan, I like what you did with the games on the side, just gigantically huge things. That's perfect. That looks good. I'm not even being sarcastic. It's just better than a huge gap, but that's big. That's really big. We should play with that in the future. I don't have plugs to start. We're going to get into all of that sort of stuff as we get going. I think we just dive into it and talk a little bit of basketball.
Sounds good.
And we are starting with your Washington Wizards at the Grizzlies, 3.5-point favorites for Memphis, 237 total. It's like 15 points higher than the Spurs Mavs game. So we have a very clear difference in pace coming into these games. On the Wizards side, we'll start at the top end, which is the most important. Westbrook is 9,800 on FanDuel and 10-1 on DraftKings. Flip-flop these guys. Bradley Beal, 10-5 on FanDuel, 9,400 on DraftKings. Who do you prefer? Do you prefer one more than the other? Do you just not like one of them? What are your thoughts on the two studs from Washington?
I think they're actually priced pretty appropriately on both sites because I think that the scoring certainly favors Westbrook on DraftKings compared to FanDuel. So it makes sense that he's more expensive than Beal. And then on FanDuel, you have Beal, a little bit more expensive where you're not getting double-double and triple-double bonuses for Westbrook. His 18 turnovers a game cost you 18 full points. So I think the pricing is good. Like both guys look like really good plays, I think. But I think that the sites did a good job of appropriately pricing them for their scoring.
So on DraftKings, we've got Westbrook and Beal projected for about 47% ownership. They're essentially equal. FanDuel is a very different story. Russ is projected for about 60, Beal down in the mid or low 40s. Do any of those numbers stand out to you?
I think they're about where they should be. I mean, both guys have a very similar range of outcomes. So I think it normally just kind of ends up being that you prefer whoever the cheaper one is.
I'm probably burying a little bit of the lead here, but I am going to jump ahead just slightly. Westbrook, Beal, Luka Doncic are basically the only three legitimate pay-up options on this slate. How do you feel about Westbrook and Beal in relationship to Luka?
Salaries are, Luka's a little bit more expensive on DraftKings. I think, like, I'm obviously happy to get to Luka, but I do think that Westbrook and Beal, given the matchup, given the pace of this game, are not too much worse. So it'll really just kind of come down to what does the rest of the lineup look like. Like
Okay.
Luka, you're still expecting 1.6 fantasy points per minute. On average, Westbrook and Beal are around 1.4. So the matchup itself isn't quite accounting for that entire difference, but there is that salary gap too. So it really just comes down to the rest of the lineup. Obviously, if salary is not an issue, I prefer Luka.
One other thing that I want to touch on for Luka Doncic, we'll get there in a bit, but I don't want to forget it. He is now a small forward on FanDuel, no longer a point guard. I don't think that really matters all that much on a day like today, but just something to be aware of moving forward. Okay, and then we get into the rest of Washington, and this is where I think we can start to get into a tricky situation. I'm going to start with something that I would guess most people won't talk about today. Center rotation for the Washington Wizards. Alex Len did not play in the final game before the break. Do you expect Alex Len to be back in the rotation? Does it matter? Because I think there's a bit of a trickle-down effect if it does.
Yeah, I expect him to be back. One thing, so Washington's center rotation has been extremely difficult to predict since Thomas Bryant went down. But one thing that has seemed to be a pretty consistent pattern for Scott Brooks is that against the bigger, higher usage centers, he looks more to Alex Len to pick up some minutes, and then you get Robin Lopez playing pretty steady minutes as well. And Mo Wagner tends to take a hit there. And then in games, like the Clippers, for example, where you don't really have a Joe Val or a Jokic or a Vooch or someone like that, you get Mo Wagner playing more minutes. They play a little bit smaller. So I do think that, again, it's really uncertain, but I do think that there's a good chance that Len rejoins the rotation today, which the biggest impact there is that it would take minutes away from Wagner, because basically the idea would be that they're looking to go a little bit bigger in place of Wagner. So it would take minutes away from him. You would probably still get mid-20s in minutes from Lopez, and then Len playing, anywhere from like 8 to 18. The last time these teams played, which was March 2nd, Wagner played 11 minutes, did not play in the second half. Robin Lopez played 14 minutes. Alex Len played 19 minutes. I don't expect Len to lead the centers in minutes, but I do think there's a good chance that he takes some from Wagner.
Okay. Mo Wagner is 4K on FanDuel. He is 3,200 on DraftKings. Would you rather have Mo Wagner today on DK or Robin Lopez at 3,400?
I'd rather have Robin Lopez. I just think the minutes are more secure for him. Not that, they're super secure, and not that he's the best fantasy producer. Like Wagner is clearly a better producer when he's on the floor, but I just think that there's a lot of ways for Lopez to get there over Wagner. Like we were just saying, Wagner very easily could lose some minutes here to Len and Lopez because of the size, but you've also just had a lot of games where Lopez ends up being the closing center and gets like 23, 24, 25 minutes. So I just think that the combination of matchup and Lopez's role in general, kind of like his baseline rotation, makes him look a little bit better to me.
Okay. Yeah. Lopez at 20% ownership right now. Mo Wagner projected for 16. I mean, the rest of Washington just becomes quite a mixed bag. Rui, Denny, Bertans, Lopez, Neto, and Mo Wagner, all basically between like 15 and 20% ownership. Do you see anything from Washington outside of those like Westbrook and Beal that stands out as a good play to you?
I think this is one of those situations, kind of like you were talking to at the top, where there's no real clear way to get it right, but you're going to need to if you're going to win a tournament tonight. Yeah. I do think that, so Rui Hachimura has been just flat out terrible from a fantasy standpoint recently, but he still has a very clear path to getting a lot of minutes, especially when he plays well. So I am kind of interested there, but I also think that the salary, 4,400 for Davis Bertans is really cheap when you consider that he's most likely going to get 26 plus minutes if this game's competitive, and that he, has the ability to go out there and drain 3-pointers. So he's scoring he's always tough to trust because he's a scoring dependent player with like a 20% usage rate. But I think that given the slate and given, the options, I think it's a pretty good salary on Bertans.
Is there anybody slipping through the cracks on this team? Anybody that could pop up? Like, is Troy Brown suddenly a part of this rotation heading into the second half?
I mean, it's Scott Brooks, so maybe, but I don't think so. I think it's pretty much, Westbrook and Beal are obviously the priorities. The center rotation is what it is. And then you kind of just have this wing rotation where, Bertans can get hot. Rui's going to play some better games than he has been. Howell Neto has typically been playing 24, 25 minutes, closing some games as well. You know, I guess the one guy, if you were looking for a Troy Brown type, would be Denny Avdia, since he's actually in the rotation and
3,100 today.
Yeah. But I think more often than not, you're not getting enough minutes from Avdia for it to matter, though he has played 25 in each of his last couple of games.
I know that's the trickiest part. We haven't projected for 15% ownership. That seems oddly low to me at 3,100 today. But again, there's no confidence in any of these like mid threes guys on a day like today. They've got plenty of them on a couple different teams, and the minutes variability here is really tricky. Favorite play from the Wizards?
Westbrook.
Okay. Moving it over to Memphis now. Ooh, we're moving pretty good. That could be worse. We'll figure out how to get to 11 o'clock. We'll start on the Memphis side now. Ja Morant, the most expensive guy on the Grizzlies, $8K on FanDuel, $7,800 on DraftKings, picking up a decent chunk of ownership. You know, we've got Morant, Joe Val, Brooks, Clark, all in the 30s, Winslow, Slow-Mo in the 20s, DeAnthony Melton, Bane, Jones, even Tillman, all getting ownership. Everybody that I projected in the rotation for the Grizzlies today are 11% owned or higher. Let's just start with Ja. How are you feeling about him in like sort of the upper mid tier?
Yeah, I mean, I always like him. The only concern is that his playing time, and it's obviously a bigger issue on bigger slates, but his playing time never really reaches quite the same level as other players in his price range, but that's not really an issue today with there only being 2 games. So I think it makes him look better. You also obviously have the favorable matchup. Even though Washington has been playing better defensively recently, they play at a really fast pace, and you know, I'm still not convinced that they're actually a solid defensive team. So I think it looks really good for Morant. The salary has come up a little bit, but you know, I think he looks like a very good option.
Yeah, same here. Then we get into, all right, let's rank it like this. We've got Brandon Clark, Dillon Brooks, Joe Val, and Morant, all basically 30 to 35% owned. So, you know, comparable ownership across the board. Do you have a preference between those 4 guys? Do you see one as significantly better than the other? Do you see any that are significantly worse than the others?
So the 4 were Morant, Valanciunas,
Brooks, and Clark.
I think Morant and Valanciunas are the top 2. Like, I mean, and obviously that almost goes without saying, but they are more expensive. But even, you know, factoring in the salary, I think that's the case. I think that it's a really, really good spot for Joe Val. You know, it's a good spot for Morant also, but this is a Washington team that does struggle to rebound. And it's kind of funny. I know I've mentioned it before, but there was a point where we were doing a show and I went to look up during the show. I looked up Washington's like offensive rebound numbers allowed, and they were allowing like the fewest offensive rebounds per game, despite playing at the fastest pace. But it was back when they were just allowing teams to score every time they shot the ball. And you've seen now that they're playing better defense. They're now like the worst team at preventing offensive rebounds. So it makes sense. I mean, it's a team that doesn't rebound well. Now you have Joe Val out there for probably around 30 minutes, getting a ton of rebounds and putbacks and scoring around the rim. So I really, really like the spot for Joe Val. Obviously I like it for Morant, and I like it. I think Dillon Brooks would be the 3rd guy here, just because the minutes should be there for him more consistently than they are for Clark. And the pace, I think, and the relative lack of defense from Washington benefits him. Like, you should just get a lot of open looks from 3 for Dillon Brooks here at a very reasonable salary.
I'm with you on all that. Also, Dillon Brooks, shooting guard, small forward, eligible on DraftKings on a 2-game slate when you can put him in 5 of the 8 positions. That is a very important guy to get into your lineup. So I'm actually surprised that his ownership isn't a little bit higher. The next guy I think we need to touch on, $3,900 Justice Winslow. How does he compare to someone like, I don't know, the whole like around 4K tier on Washington? Do we see his minutes creep up? You know, I gave him 24 at this first run. I don't know when they're really going to take the shackles off of him and really let him loose, if they even can at this point. How are you feeling about Justice Winslow today?
I think he's a good value. I don't say that with a ton of confidence, because I kind of thought the rotation would have ramped up more than it has by now. Yeah. But I think that given the role he plays offensively here, the usage is higher for him than it normally is, you know, in other points of his career. He still rebounds. He still gets enough assists to be useful when he's on the floor. So I'm willing to take my chances there. Like, there's a decent chance he only plays 20 minutes, but he does have the ability to play 24 or 25, which obviously would be really nice at that salary.
We need to talk about this DeAnthony Melton, Desmond Bane conundrum because it's two different questions on both sites. Melton and Bane are separated by $600 on DraftKings, 4,600 and 4K. I don't really need 4K Desmond Bane on DraftKings. I think Melton looks pretty good. On FanDuel, DeAnthony Melton is 6K and Desmond Bane is the flat minimum. I think that flips those two guys in terms of interest. How do you want to handle these two guys? I don't even really know how. I have no concept of how many minutes DeAnthony Melton plays today. He's my biggest question mark.
Yeah, DeAnthony Melton's a huge question mark because he played 26 minutes the last time these two teams played, but that was the game where Kyle Anderson was out in addition to Grayson Allen, and Melton played insanely well off the bench. So and then last game with Anderson back, he played 14 minutes. I think that it's more likely you get 14 to 15 minutes from Melton. He had gone from basically not being in the rotation. Then he had the monster game against Washington, and then Anderson came back and he played 14 minutes. I think that the most likely outcome is that he ends up in that range. But he is good enough and a good enough fantasy producer that at the cheap salary on DraftKings, especially if ownership's not going to be that high, it's kind of interesting to look at him in larger field tournaments just because he's one of those guys where if for one reason or another we're wrong on the minutes projection, he's very likely to have a good game. Whereas on FanDuel, you kind of have to be off on your minutes projection by 100% or something.
Yeah, 6K DeAnthony Melton is I'm paying up to be very contrarian. We have him projected for 6% ownership right now. 6K dude that could play 14 minutes today is pretty tricky. I definitely don't expect Ja to go out there and play 39 minutes again like he did on the 4th. So maybe that's a spot where he gets more than 15 and that number goes to 18. But ultimately, very different plays on FanDuel and DraftKings for Melton and for Bane. Final two guys that we could touch on are basically the backup point guard and the backup center. Do you get to Tyus Jones or Xavier Tillman at all? Did I say is it Xavier? I'm so used to
you ask
Henry.
I have any idea.
Yeah, I'm sure it's Xavier Tillman.
Yeah, I mean that would be.
That's just not how I read it because of the dude from Kansas from back in the day.
Yeah, I mean they are what they are. Don't play Tyus Jones with John Morant. Don't play Tillman with Valanciunas. If Valanciunas gets in foul trouble, maybe Brandon Clark gets those minutes, but you also probably get a bump for Tillman. If John Morant gets in foul trouble or something, something weird happens, Tyus Jones is most likely benefiting there. So they're just purely large field filler where basically you're just hoping to get lucky.
Only guy we haven't touched on in Memphis, and I think it's really crazy that Memphis is just fully 10 deep here. We legitimately kind of have to mention everybody. Any interest in Slow-Mo, 6,500 on FanDuel, 6,300 on DraftKings. I think he's just sort of appropriately priced-ish.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much priced where he should be. It is nice that he's back playing the 4 now. There was that little stretch where they were starting Brandon Clark or Tillman. That helps his numbers, but the minutes are just so inconsistent. He's competing with Brandon Clark for playing time. He's potentially competing with other guys too. So I think he's pretty much priced where he should be. Maybe a little bit higher than he should be.
Favorite play from the Grizzlies?
Valanciunas or Morant.
Okay. Well, one game in the books. That wasn't too bad. We basically said every single name here, so that should sound like other shows in the industry. Whatever, I don't care. Big schedule, though, coming out today. We have a ton of content as we are now back with the NBA season, but we're kicking it off 3 p.m. NHL strategy show. Cliffy and Josh are breaking it down. Not me. I can't break down hockey. I don't know anything about it. I can play a little bit of NHLPA 93 on Sega. That is about the extent of my hockey abilities. 5 p.m., so late lock today. Lock is at 8 p.m., so everything's an hour later than normal. Got the tip-off show with Kayla Spags and Ben at 5 p.m. The deeper dive with Eric and Adam will be back for that bad boy at 6. And then 7 o'clock, I'm back, NBA Live Before Lock for an hour with Greg Ehrenberg. And then finally, 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight, right after NBA Live Before Lock, we transition to the golf guys, Jason Roslin, Ben Raza, breaking down the Players' Championship. Fun stuff all around. We're loaded schedule today. Five more shows, 5 more hours worth of content on the channel, plus a game plan stream that I don't know who's doing it today, but someone for sure. Alex, DeColts, Sean's on. There's no telling who's doing it today, but one of the pros on the back end are going to be doing that. We've got some free content today as well. NBA player projections are free. NHL ownership projections are free. Perfect day to get a little playing in because we got some big contests today in the NBA, at least 200K up top in the big FanDuel contest. I'm assuming it's something comparable on DraftKings. What are they running today?
250.
There you go. 250, even better. So lots of money going around today if you guys want to play, and you should. And then we'll touch on No House Advantage right now. The presenting sponsor of this show. You don't have to worry about normal projections. It's not like that. We're picking player props, very different mechanism at No House Advantage, and you're ranking them on a confidence interval. So the prop you like the most, you'll rank for, say, 8 points, and then 7 and 6 and 5 down the line. And the good news is we have a ton of No House Advantage free content on the website every day. No House Advantage prop projections. So Alex is running his data and comparing it to the projections or comparing it to the props, coming out with the best props you can have. We also post optimal lineups for No House Advantage. We do all the work for you, and it's free. Just sign up using the promo code Awesemo, get yourself a first deposit match bonus of up to $20, and build your bankroll. You'll see some overlay. We're giving you the goods to make your lineups. Everything is pointing in your direction, and it's not going to cost you a single cent coming out of us. So why else would we promote it then? We're gaining nothing from this one. We want you to use that promo code, but you get extra money. We're giving you the tools, and you don't even have to pay for them. Now, you should go to awesemo.com/join to do that, but this is the perfect spot for you guys if you're trying to get into DFS, you want to build up a bankroll, you want a little bit softer competition, you're checking off all those boxes with No House Advantage. All right, one game down, one more game to go. San Antonio Spurs at the Dallas Mavericks. Spurs are 4.5-point dogs. 222.5 total was the last that I saw. So we're pretty low there. Let's start on the San Antonio side. Tricky team. They're finally getting everybody back. Only guy that is out today, Devin Vassell, but they have been bitten by the COVID bug over the past 2 weeks. And now everybody is slowly coming back. So we will start with some of the chalk. DeJounte Murray, DeMar DeRozan, both about 30% owned on FanDuel and DK. Murray is 8,500 on FanDuel, just 7,500 on DraftKings. Talk to me a little bit about Murray. Talk to me a little bit about DeRozan.
In general, it's going to be really difficult to get a read on this team, I think. The guys that you can feel the most confident in their playing time are Murray and DeRozan. But I still think it's a situation where, especially if they are getting a lot of ownership, they're good. But I don't think they really compare to guys in that Memphis and Washington game because they are priced up a bit from playing so many games with guys out. And even though DeRozan and Murray are the leaders on this offense, you're going to have guys now kind of just like, edging into that a little bit. Like Aldridge is back. I don't know how many minutes Aldridge will play, but whenever he's on the floor, it's going to take a little bit more usage away than when Jakob Poeltl is out there or Trey Lyles is out there. Derek White is back. I don't know how many minutes he's going to play, but when he's out there, it does take production away from Murray. It can take production away from DeRozan. So I think it's a situation where they are just naturally a little bit overpriced for everyone to be healthy, even though they are still the top two options in this offense, and they do still have really high ceilings. So in situations like that, a lot of it does come down to ownership and how, everything compares between them and guys from the Washington-Memphis game, for example. I do think Murray and DeRozan are the safest options from the Spurs. I just think that they're priced a little bit higher than they really should be, given the close to full health of this team.
So you mentioned two guys that are quite questionable here. Not questionable in their injury designation, just questionable in that we don't know what they're going to be doing. Derek White is 5,600 on FanDuel, 5K on DK. Lamarcus Aldridge, 5,500 and 5,500. Do you see either one of those guys being interesting plays? We don't have their ownership projected in a spot that I expect to be correct in the long run, so we'll ignore that right now. What do we do with Derek White and Lamarcus Aldridge today?
I think I'd have to be playing a lot of tournaments to start getting to them. It's just really tough. You have Derek White, hasn't played in a while. Maybe he comes back and plays like 24 minutes, which I think is probably reasonable. But still, at 5K on DraftKings, it's probably going to be like 20-ish fantasy points, 22 fantasy points, somewhere in there. So kind of just, a mediocre spot there. Lamarcus Aldridge had been playing off the bench and not playing a lot of minutes at all. So don't really have full confidence in him getting like a ton of minutes unless he's back in the starting lineup. And he hasn't really been good this year anyway. I think it's just kind of an awkward price where like they're priced they're priced at a discount relative to where they would be if we expected them to play 32 minutes, but they're not really priced for what their role is most likely to be. So it still leaves them, at least in terms of like an average projection, I think it still leaves them overpriced. It means that they have a little bit higher ceiling for their salary than some other people, because we could just be wrong on how much they play. But I think that it's a lot more likely that they're just a little bit more expensive than they should be.
I'm going to name all the guys that are within $200 of Derek White on DraftKings. I want you to tell me who you prefer, okay?
Yep.
$5,200 Brandon Clark.
Clark?
Yes. $5,100 Keldon Johnson, who I think is going most underrepresented on this team, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's really close, but I would go toward Johnson.
Okay. $4,900 Josh Richardson.
Richardson, just because of the minutes.
Interesting. Okay. Lonnie Walker.
Derek White.
Okay. Tim Hardaway.
I think it's really close, but I think that one's really close.
Okay. Interesting. We're on different ends of the spectrum on Tim Hardaway there. Brandon Clark was the only one that I thought was like a clear, not even close to Derek White. He's tricking. I really don't know what to make of White. Aldridge, I'm comfortable not being there. And if he beats me, like, I'm kind of cool with that. I have no idea what his health is going to be. He's got 2 question marks, hasn't been playing a ton, and has an injury that I don't trust at all. Only other guys we haven't touched on here: Patty Mills, 4K on FanDuel, 4,500 on DraftKings. A lot easier to get to on FanDuel for sure. Rudy Gay now back. I don't think that he plays enough to really be relevant. 5,200 on FanDuel, 4,700 on DraftKings. And then finally, Jakob Poeltl, 6,500 on FanDuel, 6K on DK. Any of the names that I just mentioned, people that are standing out to you in any way?
No, I think this team's just a mess. Like, I think you're going to get, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the only people on this team that play more than 28 minutes are DeJounte Murray and DeMar DeRozan.
I'm going to list out all of the centers that I gave minutes to on FanDuel. Okay. We're going to throw Jonas Valanciunas in the garbage right out of the gate, because if you tell me you like one of these guys more than him, I'm not going to understand DFS anymore.
Yeah, that center position on FanDuel is a train wreck.
Robin Lopez, Jakob Poeltl, Dwight Powell, Willie Cauley-Stein, Alex Len. What does Jonas Valanciunas end up being owned? Who is the second best center option on FanDuel today?
Valanciunas has to be like 85% owned or something.
It's preposterous, right? That might be the biggest disparity in talent I've ever seen on a slate.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be like 80+%.
When I ran my sims earlier today, I had Joe Val get to 60. And so that's 40% split to Rolo and Poeltl, I guess. Does that make Jakob Poeltl more or less interesting to you on FanDuel, given what I just explained?
I think I would just rather play Jovel. Like, Poeltl's the problem in the way I see it, and like I don't have the FanDuel ownership in front of me, but just the way that this typically plays out.
I can give you whatever you want. I have it in front of me here.
Just in general, the way it typically is going to play out is Poeltl's the only like remotely similar pivot to Valanciunas.
Yeah.
So anyone that's like, oh, Valanciunas is going to be too popular, they're going to just play Poeltl. And typically what ends up happening is that the gap ends up being closer than it should be, because people think they're being smart and playing Poeltl instead of Joval. And it just gets to a point where you would have been better off just playing Joval in every lineup. So I just think I would rather go Joval. Like, there are a million spots on this slate where you're going to be able to embrace volatility and variance and be contrarian in doing so. I don't think you need to do it at a position where one player projects 10 plus points higher than every other player.
Joe Val projected for 51% ownership, Jakob Poeltl at 21, Rolo at 14.5, Drew Eubanks at 6.5, which will absolutely not be there as we get closer to lock. Willie Cauley-Stein 3, Dwight Powell 2.5, Alex Len 1. Is there any chance that Dwight Powell is just the center again for the Mavs?
There's
3% Dwight Powell at the flat minimum on FanDuel actually does stand out to me, because I think they want Dwight Powell to be their center.
I do not think that.
Really? they got a lot of money wrapped up into Dwight Powell, and him playing is a lot more important to them than him not playing. And it's certainly not Willie Cauley-Stein as the future.
He played 4 minutes last game.
I agree, but this is also a guy coming back off an Achilles injury. A couple days off might not be the worst thing in the world for him.
No, I mean, I don't think Powell's barely even in the rotation as long as Maxey and Porzingis are playing.
Sure. What if Willie Cauley-Stein doesn't play today? He did not play in the last one, but they only also played Dwight Powell 4 minutes. But, we didn't have Luka. So what is the max that you could expect of minutes from one of Powell or Willie Cauley-Stein? I guess is the better question.
16.
Okay. That's interesting to me on today's slate. That's the only place that I think that I could squeeze in. And we're going to get to Dallas.
And I think that's max.
Right now.
That's the actual projection.
Sure. I think that they would want 16 minutes of the Dwight Powell they had last year before he tore his Achilles.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's nothing that they've done all season or have been doing that suggests that they're playing Dwight Powell, though.
I mean, sort of.
Like whenever the only times Powell has gotten minutes or opportunities are when the guys ahead of him are out. He hasn't been taking minutes from anybody.
I don't need him to take minutes from anybody. I just need him to take some minutes so that I can play a center that isn't Joval.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I can possibly look at center after that. Like, to me, that is a spot where, like, if I'm getting off of Joval, I would rather roll the dice on Powell or Willie Cauley-Stein and cross my fingers that those guys actually get run.
I'd rather go to one of the Washington centers. Like, I think that...
I agree with you on Robin Lopez because I think his minutes are the most secure of any of those three guys. But I would rather go to Powell or Willie Cauley-Stein, whatever guy I think is going to get more minutes, than Len. And Mo Wagner is not at center there.
Alex Len's a better fantasy producer than either one of Cauley-Stein or Powell. If they're assuming that the $700 to $1,000 isn't going to matter because it's FanDuel and it's a 2-game slate, you're just hoping any of them play minutes. I would take the one in Len that is going to actually produce when he's out there.
Here's the reason that it is interesting to me. Because Luka is now a small forward, we have Russ at point guard, Beal at shooting guard, and Luka at small forward. The three guys that you can pay up for means that you can pay down at center. And I don't know what that construction looks like. That might even be just full on impossible on a day like today. But I think that it does mix up a little bit. If Luka was still a point guard, I think it would look a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that because there's 3 spots to you. I don't know. I'm running a quick lineup now just to see if you can even do that or what it looks like.
I assume it looks like utter garbage.
Yeah, it's going to be bad if I even get one.
Look, it's the only thing that I could throw at this Dallas slate right now. And we're going to transition to Dallas now, unless you have any other Spurs thoughts.
It still gives me Valanciunas if I do that, by the way.
Makes sense. Wait, what? You still get Joval if you lock Beal,
yeah.
Westbrook, and Luka?
Westbrook, Neto, Beal, Bane, Doncic, Winslow, Maxey, Wagner, Jovel.
That's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Right. That's it's bad, but it makes sense. Like, I would rather, even though I'm not really big on Wagner here, I would rather roll the dice on Wagner at power forward 2 and have Joval than roll the dice on one of those cheap centers and then still have to play another power forward.
All right. You get now, since we have infinite time today, I am grabbing my projections and running this to see what I get in that same scenario. Okay. So my optimal on FanDuel right now is 285.8. If I lock Russ, Beal, and Luka, my optimal is 274.4. So I lose 11 points, which is not a problem to me. I get Neto, Bane, DFS, Maxey, Mo Wagner, and Joval. I am shocked that I guess that explains how good of a play Joval is today.
Yeah, I say it just reinforces how good of a play Joval is.
Yeah. I think that is the most interesting piece of running that crunch with those 3 studs, is that you still get to Joval. That's how much better he is than every other center, relatively speaking. It's really hard to make those points up. Anyway, to Dallas, Luka Doncic, 11K on FanDuel, 10-7 on DraftKings, 50% owned on both sites. Do you have anything to add on Luka?
No. I mean,
he's the best play on the slate.
Yeah, he's the top fantasy producer on the slate. He's the most expensive player on the slate. I don't think it's going to be that tough to get him in the lineups because there's not like value that you look at and you're like, oh, this is clearly a great play. But there's a lot of value options that you can go to and mix and match, and some of them are going to do well. So the point being that like it's going to be really hard to pinpoint going in which of those value guys are going to be the ones that you need, but it seems very likely just based on the number of value options that there are that the winning lineups are going to have Luka and or Beal and or Westbrook because some combination of the value guys are going to do well.
Yeah, without question. And as you can see from locking Westbrook, Beal, and Luka, you still get Joval. That also lets me know that it's not going to be all that hard to find value to get to just like if Luka's your first guy in, you're not going to have a problem filling out that rotation. If we can already do it with Beal and Westbrook in there too, there's plenty of money to go around, oddly enough, on this 2-game slate. Now let's touch on the rest of Dallas because Luka's easy to just talk to quickly. Kristaps Porzingis is 8,300 on FanDuel, 8,600 on DraftKings. We've got him projected for the same amount of ownership as Luka on FanDuel at 8,300. It's around 30 on DraftKings. I'm feeling pretty good about KP here. I'm comparable to the actual ownership, but how are you feeling about Porzingis? Coming out of the All-Star break, a couple days rest for him, probably not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, I think the rest is probably a good thing. I think he's also, pretty expensive, and I think it might be hard to get to him because that's the range where, like, if you're prioritizing Joval, especially on FanDuel, but if you're prioritizing Joval and you're trying to get at least a couple of the, Luka, Westbrook, Beal pieces, I think it'll be tough to get to that Porzingis price range. But I do think that he's someone that would make a lot of sense. Like if for example, you go, let's say Westbrook, Beal, Morant as like a mini game stack there, and you forego Luka, it makes a lot of sense to go to Porzingis and hope that he's the one that just happens to take on the lion's share of Dallas's production in this game.
I mean, if you don't have Luka Doncic in a lineup, I think it's borderline irresponsible to not have Kristaps Porzingis in it.
Yeah,
like it's you kind of almost have to.
I mean,
one of those two guys kind of needs to be in almost. I mean, I would assume if you ran a crunch, you would have one of those two guys in all but 5% of lineups at best.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily like you don't have to have Porzingis. I would definitely be bumping him like in your projections in lineups that don't have Luka, but it's still easy to see like how you wouldn't need either one. And the answer is just that the Washington game shoots out and the Dallas game doesn't. Like if Luka goes for 58 fantasy points and Porzingis, gets his 40, there's a realistic chance that you don't need either of them if like Westbrook and Beal both go for 60.
Yeah, and I guess I was thinking a little bit of it through the lens of FanDuel, where it's Porzingis at the top, Brandon Clark, Maxey, Aldridge, Bertans, Wagner, Tillman, just like a lot of like priced mid fives, 20 fantasy point type dudes. Where I mean, I have Kristaps Porzingis 12 fantasy points ahead of the next closest. Like, I think Brandon Clark's a solid play on FanDuel today. I have Kristaps Porzingis 12 points ahead of him in just raw projection. It's another spot where, like, it's so hard to just get away from that. Dallas would have to put up like 81 real points for it to be a real problem for Luka and KP here. And then we get into the rest of this team. Jalen Brunson, DFS, Maxey, all on FanDuel in the mid 20s in ownership. Richardson at 20, Hardaway at 20. Another crapshoot of guys that are around 5K at around 20% ownership. Who stands out to you most from Dallas?
None of them.
Yep.
I mean, I think I would lean toward Brunson just because he produces at a higher rate than Richardson. And I think he probably plays a minute or two more than Hardaway. But I think that projections in general are going to be pretty close between those guys. So the lower owned or the cheapest, depending on what you need for your particular lineup, is going to typically be the right answer.
Yeah, this is just, it's rough. $5,400 J Rich on FanDuel is a bit of a tough sell for me. He's $4,900 on DK. I think that looks a little bit better. Oh, by the way, we've got 470 people in here and only 70 likes. I must be really slacking at my job right now. I don't want to be looking like Laffy hosting the show. So if you guys can go ahead and hit that thumbs up, it would help us out a ton. But also subscribe to the channel. We're still looking to get a ton of subscribers. And the higher that number goes, the more frequently we're going to do giveaways based on our subscriber count. So keep subscribing, but hit that like button because it bothers me when it's low. I don't even know what else to say for Dallas right now. Dallas is 7 reasonable players that you need to rotate through. The Spurs are, I don't know, 7 to 9, depending on how that rotation shakes out. The whole Washington-Memphis game is fully in play. Who's the guy on this slate that wins the slate? Who's the sub 5% guy that we're not thinking of?
I mean, sub 5%, it's probably an awful play if it's a 2-game slate.
Agreed. And don't pick anybody that's not going to be 5%, even though we have them at sub 5%.
What?
Well, we've got some guys that won't be picked. Like we'll be picking up more. Derek White's not going to be 2.4% owned.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's Berton's ownership.
18. All right, I'll name everybody that's in single digits. Okay. I mean, is it like, is it Len, honestly, who could also play 4 minutes?
Well, yeah. Rudy Gay is probably the answer.
Yeah.
Like if Rudy Gay plays 24 minutes at 4,700, there's a pretty good chance he's in the winning lineup.
It's true. That's true. Anything else you want to touch on from Dallas right now?
I don't think so.
All right. Let's talk about the slate then as a whole before we slowly round on out of here. Guys, you only got up to 94. Like, do you guys forget how to hit the thumbs up button during the All-Star break? Call for likes, only 30. We're still at 500 people. I'm sad, guys. I'm sad. See what happens when you take a couple of days off? Everybody forgets what they need to do. It's not helpful at all. All right, so if you're paying up on DraftKings, Luka 10-7, Russ 10-1. I guess we'll say Beal at 9,400. Luka Doncic is the priority in that group?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Who is your preferred value option? Sub 4K guy who stands out most to you?
On DraftKings?
Yes, on DraftKings.
Sub 4K.
Oh, God, what a list of names.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Winslow. I guess Winslow.
Okay.
Him or Robin Lopez, but probably Winslow.
I think my answer might be Denny. Although Winslow having guard forward at 3,900 is comparable. I would get. Who plays more minutes today, Justice Winslow or Denny Avdija?
I think the range for Winslow is a lot tighter. The floor is a lot higher. They're probably close.
God, I have Denny at 23 and Winslow at 24, just for reference sake.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. It's Avdija's rotation has just been so inconsistent. Like, I don't know what, 3 or 4 games ago, he was basically just the backup to Rui, and he was playing like 13 minutes a game.
Yeah.
And then, recently he's been getting into the mid-20s, which I buy into just because that's what the Wizards should be doing.
Yeah.
Like, they should be just having Garrison Matthews start each half and then Denny Avdija play a bunch of minutes behind him. And, Avdija can play multiple positions as well. But Scott Brooks doesn't always do what makes sense to any other rational human.
No, not quite. That, oh God, these rotations are just truly, truly tricky. Ownership is going to play such an enormous role here. Like the mid-tier that's just crowded, a very similar 20 fantasy point, 5K type guys. If you're in large field GPPs, particularly on a night like tonight when you're taking a shot at a 250K prize pool or first place prize, just getting from the guy that's 25% to the guy that's 15% is going to pay some pretty large dividends, because there's just so much similar grossness in the middle of all of this. I know this is a really dumb question, but this seems like a slate where we don't really have to pay close attention to news all that much. It feels like everybody's just sort of back. We don't have any like lingering Q tags. Do we get hit with anything that throws the slate like completely out of whack in that final hour?
I mean, probably, but I don't know what it would be like.
Sure.
Yeah, because I had the same thought before the show. It was just like, wow, this is a really clean, like these couple guys are out. Like Jaren Jackson's not back from Memphis, so we don't have to figure out how he fits in.
No one has a questionable tag. There's not a single person. Although I don't know if that's just because there's not an injury report yet.
Well, I mean, on last night's injury report, there wasn't.
Was there an injury report last night?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an 8:30 injury report.
Okay. I didn't look.
Tyrell Terry is the only questionable player.
Whew.
Do you know what team he's on?
Yes, the Mavericks.
Okay.
I didn't know he was with the team though.
Yeah, and every team had two players and everyone listed is out except for Tyrell Terry. So there was like nothing on that injury report.
Even better. So let's ignore the fact that we could get like a random dude out or Q tag or whatever. Do you think we see any weird person in the starting lineup of one of these four teams? Because I think all of these teams are ripe for weird changes coming out of the break.
Weird meaning how? Like Trey Lyles could still start.
Sure. Well, like what if Desmond Bane doesn't start for Memphis?
Oh, and they start like Brandon Clark.
Or Melton, or anybody here. Yeah, like I think Memphis's starting lineup could be a wealth of different things.
Yeah,
other than Morant,
Washington could start Avdija over Matthews.
Yeah,
they could start Bertans over Matthews.
Yeah, I think that could vary. The San Antonio Spurs starting lineup, I don't even want that could truly be anything.
Yeah,
Dallas is the only one that I would say is probably like the most firm, and even they can be very different today.
Yeah, and even Washington, the last time they played Memphis, they started Lopez in the second half, so maybe he starts. Yeah. I agree. Other than Dallas, who I don't think is doing anything different, you could see one or two pieces from each team that could move. San Antonio, you could see like three pieces move because who knows?
How would your thoughts on Washington's center rotation change based on the starter?
If Wagner doesn't start, I would assume Wagner doesn't play.
Whoa, okay. Glad I asked that question.
I mean, I guess he could play against Tillman.
Yeah. It would actually make more sense for him to not start in this game and play against Tillman. So I guess my question then is, who do you expect to be the starting center for the Washington Wizards today?
Wagner.
Interesting. That's a really weird scenario for Washington. For him to start and likely be projected to play less minutes against a Memphis team with Joval, who does not fit the pattern of being the guy that you would put against Mo Wagner.
Yeah, the reason I say I think he starts is that I can't remember who they played now, but there was a game, I don't know, 2 weeks ago where it was a similar situation. Like they had played a couple days beforehand. Wagner got benched because of the matchup, played like 6 minutes. It seemed like it was the perfect spot for him not to start. And then he still started. And if I remember correctly, he actually played a bunch of minutes.
Okay.
Because again, Scott Brooks just pulls names out of a hat. But yeah, I mean, my guess is that Wagner starts. If he doesn't start, I would think that it's a sign that either he's just going to get some backup minutes against Tillman or that they're going with Len and Lopez.
Okay. Just trying to see if there's any other like random questions that I want to hit on, because
I would probably treat it, if Len or Lopez starts, I would probably, give them 22, 24 minutes. I'd probably give Wagner, like 8 to 12 off the bench and then give the rest to whoever doesn't start. Because I wouldn't feel confident that it's a 48-minute split between Lopez and Len. I think that would be in the range of outcomes, but I think because it's not a true two-center rotation, there's a decent chance that it would just be Wagner coming off the bench. Is
Rui playing any minutes at the 5?
That's what I was actually going back to look at what they had done the last time.
This team has 3 like center-only options, and they still don't get 48 minutes out of their center.
Yeah. They normally come close.
Yeah.
But so I mean, looking back at their last game against Memphis, the closing lineup prior to, garbage time was Westbrook, Beal, Rui, Bertans, and Avdija. Valanciunas was on the floor for Memphis, so they closed with Rui at the 5. Did they do that both halves? They closed both halves with Rui at the 5.
I would be
No.
quite.
Wagner closed the first half.
Okay, I was gonna say I would be quite shocked if they're closing anything with Rui at the 5 against Memphis because Joe Val's gonna put him in the basket.
Yeah, so Joe Val did not close the first half. Wagner did. Second half, Joe Val closed and Rui closed at the 5.
What was how long were they in together?
Rui played 3 minutes and 21 seconds, and then it was garbage time.
What was he? Plus minus wise?
Yeah, for
that stretch. Just for that stretch.
I don't know how to tell for that stretch.
Just hover over it. I assume you're on Popcorn Machine.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. -1.
Okay. Yeah. Rui closing against Joe Val feels like a real big problem.
Yeah. For the game, he was -26, but for that stretch, he was -1.
Even better. Well, at least he held it together for that 3-minute stretch.
Alex Len was +10 leading the team.
Interesting. Any other final thoughts on this slate before we get out of here?
You mentioned it earlier, but I think ownership just plays a really big role here. And it's something, I mean, in general with NBA, especially the bigger the slate and the more ownership is going to end up being compressed, you can sort of weight or view projections or target score or whatever a little bit higher just because ownership is going to be lower and all that. But on a slate like this where there's so much volatility and outside of a few players, you really can't be that confident in anyone's minutes projections. So you're just getting increased volatility in terms of their production and their playing time. Ownership just becomes really, really important.
I could not agree more. Pay attention to everything today, guys. I think the deeper dive in Live Before Lock will be very essential, especially as lineups start trickling out, because that's really the only information that we have that's hanging out there. You on the deep dive today?
Yeah, I'll have the deep dive out in a few hours. I'll have to be on the deeper dive later with Eric, I believe.
Yes, correct. So that's it. Good. We're back in business with an NBA strategy show. Look at us. It's been so long now. We don't have to talk about football like we know what we're talking about. It's fantastic. We can talk about the NBA and actually get this stuff right. I hope your best ball draft is going well right now because I know that you certainly don't hear me doing my outro. So for that, we are done. Thank you guys for joining us. Tune into everything else we've got going on. Shout out to No House Advantage for being the presenting sponsor of this show. Hit the like button on your way out the door and watch everything else that we've got going on today. And thanks to Jordan Klein for being the man behind the virtual glass. Good luck tonight, everybody. We're out of here. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.